workings of Bill Bensley. What are the interiors he deals with? What are his visions and philosophies? And many more. So welcome once again. I'm going to take it forward. Let's say, my name is Siam. I'm heading the academics at GS Institute of Design. And I'm going to invite Bill to talk. But before that, very quickly, let me inform you, any of your questions may please be put down in the question and answer box, and we will be answering them after the session is over. So please feel free to put in your questions as we move forward with the session. Now, Bill has been working in the areas of interior design, architecture, landscaping, and is world renowned for his outstanding, unique, and inspiring work. Besides his profession, he is a concerned conservationist and a passionate philanthropist. His work shows that besides having fun, it is possible to help the needy, to educate, to help animals, and help the planet via conservation. So I will be inviting him to talk about that, but a little bit more about Willy. He's known as, sorry, I know you are Willy, you are Bill, and I'm going to talk to you. He's known as the Willy Wonka of design. We are going to check with him why this analogy. Recently, Bill shared the culmination of his life's work in an open source white paper called Sensible Sustainable Solutions. And he talks about how to design better hotels, to fight climate change, and to make the world a better place. We would also, of course, we'll be trying to find out what he means by that. His projects have spanned from the farthest corners of Southeast Asia, from Cambodia to Phuket. And also he's worked on various programs in Vietnam, along with the Malaysian Sultan's Royal Palace. That sounds very, very exciting. Bill stays in Bangkok, but we can see that he has far-reaching projects across the world. So welcome, Bill. And I'd invite you by asking, how come you are known as the Willy Wonka of design? What's with the analogy?
I think that perhaps let me show you just a few slides to illustrate why I'm known for that. Is that for the longest time now, for the last 30 years, my philosophy in Indonesia is called lebih gila lebih baik, which means the crazier the better. Mm-hmm. And so I never hesitate to do something out of the box. I never hesitate to do something like, for example, putting a dining table inside of a Vietnamese hat that's upside down and suspended 7 stories in the air. And this people line up to sit in these hats for 3 hours before breakfast, right? So that's kind of a Willy Wonka idea. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
You can see that? Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm. The idea here on the left-hand side is a project that we did in Capella in Ubud in Bali. Mm-hmm. And it's the idea is, what would happen if we tried to recreate a Dutch army camp of the 17th century? But what would happen? What would that be like? So this is the results here on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is another scenario of a JW Marriott hotel. And the idea I asked myself is that, what would happen if we tried to create a university that was built over 60, 70 years and put in that university a hotel?
Right. I must remind a lot of people who have probably just come in that Bill is known as the Willy Wonka of design. And I'm going to set a little context to Willy Wonka. He was the fictional character developed by Roald Dahl's novel called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, written in 1964. Films were made about them, but he's known as the eccentric owner of the Wonka Chocolate Factory. So is there something related to Willy Wonka that you associate with?
Well, you know what? This is a title that I don't use myself. I'm surprised that you picked it up because a British writer talked about Willy Wonka some couple of years ago, actually in association with this Lamarck University project. So it's not something that I live with every day, but I'm amused that you're speaking about it.
It's so attractive, you know. I'm sure the millennial is going to associate you with that and probably see the kind of work done by you. It is a little maverick. It's different. They'd like to understand a lot more about this. So what about this? What is this interior?
This is the penthouse of the M Gallery in Sapa, which is in North Vietnam. And the idea here is that this is a bar. It's a bar in the penthouse, has views 360 degrees, but the idea is that it used to be an old garment factory. And this is where actually garments were made. And this is absolutely 100% brand new, but I like to make buildings that look like they've been there for 200 years. I like to use buildings that feel like that they've been there for a long time, and we've come along and dusted off the layers of dust and reused it. It's this funny picture in that the bamboo that you see in the middle of the picture, I purposely killed that bamboo in order to make it feel this place to have this feeling of being lost for a long time.
Oh.
Sounds strange, huh?
Yeah, I think we'll have to look at what your thoughts are. Or is it something to do with the sustainability? Because you have worked a lot in luxurious hotels, which seem to really go away from the sense of being sustainable. But at the same time, within this brief, you have managed to bring in sustainable solutions. So I've heard you mention somewhere that sexiest hotel rooms are only partially air conditioned. And you're very influenced by Hassan Fathi's work, especially wind tunnel theory. So would you be showing us some of the works related to these philosophies of yours?
Yes, I will. But first, I'm going to show you the Willy Wonka.
Oh, yes.
The Willy Wonka ideas. I'm going to come to sustainability soon, huh?
Okay. All right.
So this is another idea of what I think is Willy Wonka, and we selected from all of the primary schools or secondary schools here in Thailand a series of about 50 tubas, and I really like the idea of reusing and rehabilitating. And these tubas would have been sold for scrap, but we bought them, I don't know, for $25 a piece. And then I said, well, let's hang them in a bar. And I think that it makes a really interesting idea to take garbage. One man's garbage can be another man's treasures, and that's certainly the case here.
True. Wow, that is a Willy Wonka scenery.
What about this one? This is a giant dog, and you can see his intestines, the stomach of the dog here. And then I had my friend climb into the dog's mouth and this is in Singapore, and actually it's right next to the Indian Embassy in Singapore. It's in a series of high-end residences. So that's a Willy Wonka moment.
Yes, true. That is true. So do you allow general visitors to also climb up there?
Yes, and we encourage man-eating dogs to come to this property.
All right. So those are the Willy Wonka images. I can feel that. I'm sure the participants would also be relating it similarly with you. Okay. So sorry, I put the questions, sustainable questions much earlier. Do you want me to repeat them, or are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay.
This is one of the very, very simple ideas of cross ventilation and sustainable. And while it's so darn simple, this is the project that we're doing in Antigua that I was telling you about. Every single unit that we're doing there has cross ventilation. But if you look at the vast majority of hotels that are built today, they do not cross ventilate.
Right.
This is my personal project called Shintamani. It is Shintamani Wild.
Right.
And it is in the Cardamom National Forest in southern Cambodia. And on this piece of property that's about as big as the Central Park, we've built 15 very, very small tents. And so the point here is that even though we've got this huge piece of land, we're only building a minimal footprint of 15 tents. Of course, you have to pay $2,500 in order to be here, but there is a market for this, and that $2,500 goes towards rangers. We have 115 rangers here in the park that are taking poachers' guns away, their illegal logs away, etc. We'll come back to that.
Sure.
This is Hassan Fadi's. Love his work, his circulation of natural waters. But then also, what I wanted to show you here was one of my best projects. It's called the Siam Hotel in Bangkok. And unlike, again, the vast majority of hotels where you walk in, especially in a city, you walk in the front door and it's air conditioned, I purposely, both here and in the Capella in Luang Prabang, I purposely don't air condition those spaces, because I feel that is luxury. To be able to walk in the front door and see a garden, walk in the front door and see a waterfall, that is more luxury than feeling the air conditioning.
So do you think luxury is moving into a new image, or is it dead?
I think luxury as we knew it in the past is dead. I think luxury is, for me, is adventure like this. It's adventure going to places like this. It's being able to take a bath underneath the waterfall like this. This is all on my property in Cambodia. It's a fantastic piece of land, and the reason that I took this is not to make money from the hotel, but I'm able to protect it from being mined. This land was slated by the Cambodian government to be a titanium mine, and because I bought it, I can now for perpetuity allow this land to be the home for many thousands of wild animals. So it's a great conservation project. That's my point.
Right. I also have read that you are now focusing, I mean, directing luxury to be more experiential? And is that what the new customer is demanding? Or is that how you see luxury moving away from actual just comfort and beauty to something to do with human experience?
Absolutely. I think that, the idea of, beautiful flowers in the lobby and frette sheets and so forth for high-end travelers, that is passé. That's the thing of the past. People are not interested in that anymore. What people are looking for is to be able to learn something new. That's the key. People want to learn something new. So if you present, even if it's wacky, if it's like this Dutch camp in Ubud, even people love it. It became the #1 hotel in the world last month by Travel and Leisure.
Wow.
People love to be able to learn something new. This is all of this is the #1 hotel in the world, and it's 22 rooms. And when I started this project, this was a 120 room Accor property. And I convinced my client not to build 120 rooms. I convinced my client, hey, this is you can see from here, this is a very sensitive site. Let's not chop down all the trees and build another hotel that nobody wants. Let's do something different, something out of the box. Let's use principles of minimal impact. So what we did here is we created a tent with a very, very small footprint that fits between the trees. And by doing so, we did not cut down even one tree for this entire project. We only built 22 instead of 120, but the project cost a lot less, and we are the highest rate now in Bali. We're at about $750 per night. So the owner, this is his first hotel ever. The owner, besides getting the #1 hotel in the world award, is over the moon about what we've done for him.
That sounds really mature in this sense of the business, in this world when business really is a lot about just turnovers and numbers, and well, this seems quite different. So is the other conservationist really appreciative of such work?
Absolutely, yes.
That's
People all around the world, they support this project totally because we don't need any more we don't need any more new hotels. And for me doing something like this sets an example for other architects to say no to developers. Let's do something that works with the world, without that respects Mother Nature, that says, we're not going to cut down the trees, we're not going to change the grading, we're not going to do anything harmful to Mother Nature, and let's try to work together. And we still need to do something, but let's try to do something that's copacetic, that's synergetic with what's there already.
right. So, Bill, really a hypothetical question. I mean, I can understand such a resort coming up where there is nature in abundance. But what about if you were to apply a similar concept to a busy city or a metropolitan area where, every space matters, every square inch is really so valued? What would you suggest, or how would you think about that?
Oh, I can speak on that subject for about 4 days.
We would have more webinars then.
Okay, #1 in a crowded city, especially like Delhi.
Yes.
What I'm advocating now is renovate. Don't build new. We already have so many buildings, and those buildings, some in Delhi are not the most beautiful buildings. I would say, take those buildings and then use what we have and make it better. Two, if we are building new, build the hotel so that light comes, build the building so that the light can come right through the building. Right now we have, how to say, and also cross ventilation. Right now we have so many buildings, especially outside of Delhi, that are just strictly glass boxes. And they, in my mind, are completely environmentally the opposite of what we should be doing.
True. Wow. These are, would you help us understand what are these?
What are what? Oh, here on the screen? Okay, this is a huh, you're gonna love this. This is my new project in Bali. It's not built yet. It's out on the Bukit in the south of Bali, and I'm going to do the world's first the names escaped me. The first animistic hotel.
Okay.
Celebrating animism, celebrating the idea of that there is a spirit in the ocean, there's a spirit in the moon, a spirit in the fire. And because long before Bali was influenced by Hinduism, in the 12th century, Bali was an animistic, as much of the Pacific was, much of the world was an animistic society, and until today, much of the Balinese traditions and so forth still hangs on to that animism. While they call themselves Hindu, there's this lovely hybridization. So remember what I was talking about before, that the new luxury is about teaching people something new. And this hotel, I want to teach people how the Balinese are animistic and in what ways and how they do that. So every single thing about this new hotel teaches people about this wonderful practice.
So besides this, I'm very sure a lot of your other places wanting to deliver experience would be different from each other. Could you help us? Can you give us some more examples of what kind of experiences have you designed for other places?
Okay, I will do that.
Mm-hmm.
This project is the Rosewood in Luang Prabang. And Luang Prabang is a World Heritage Site. It's my favorite village in all of Asia. Well, next to Udaipur. I love Udaipur. And this place has a fascinating history, but nobody knows about it. Nobody knows about it. So what we did was I built this property again in the UNESCO site. I built this property with 21 different rooms, but every single room talks about is celebrating a figure of Laotian history that nobody really knew. For example, this particular room here, is it blowing up for you?
Yes, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, this was celebrating a man called Leger, and he was an entomologist, a collector of bugs, and he was on the 1867 tour where they walked by foot from Angkor Wat all the way up the Mekong River to Luang Prabang. Fascinating story, but so each of the rooms is different, and the staff there, they know all of the history about all the different people that we're celebrating here. And this project, Condé Nast gave the Best Hotel in Asia award last year. Very happy with that.
So congratulations.
Thank you. There are 5 different tents, the same project. There are 5 different tents here. And I'm just going to zoom in on the tent in here. And these tents, we celebrated the 5 major hill tribe people of northern Laos. And so that inside of this, you can see just a little bit of their costuming and so forth and what they wear. This is the Black Hakka tribe. So that also tells people not just about the foreigners that came, but also the local people.
Right. So, so alongside, while reading a report, I heard you mention that you include, bring the local into and be inclusive about the local builders, traditions, material, and expertise. How
Yeah.
were you able to do that?
How many what?
Be inclusive about the local produce and the products or local customs. I can see that in some of your interiors, but were you able to do it in many places, bringing in the local and build and including them into your interiors or your work?
I've been doing that for every project, all 220 something projects that we've done over the last 30 years in 36 countries. That's my mantra.
Right. So would you expand on how did you do that? I mean, how did you include them, or how did you sort of bring them and collaborate with them?
Well, for example, this project that's right here in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
There, I've been living in Thailand now for 36 years, but when I first got to Bangkok, and maybe the first time that you went to Bangkok too, there were elephants roaming around the streets, and they would beg for bananas and such.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem was that the elephants should not live in the city, and they were getting hit and by cars, and their legs were breaking, etc. It was a bad place for them. So what we did with this project was that we purchased 36 different elephants, and we brought them up to northern Thailand and gave them this huge area in which to roam. And that was very synergetic with this tiny little Four Seasons camp that we built there. And this is the interior of that camp.
Okay.
And so it became a place where the guests could ride and then also understand about elephant care and understand how really beautiful elephants are.
Mm-hmm.
And that won the award Best Hotel in the World 3 years in a row from 2005 to 2007.
That's wonderful. Congratulations once again, Bill.
Thank you. This project is a great example. One of my first projects of it's also Four Seasons, but one of my first projects of minimal intervention. And I bring this up because there's some real fun things in here that when we started this project, there were 867 coconuts on the site. And when we finished, there were 867 coconuts on the site.
Okay.
So, yeah, we didn't cut down even one. And what I did was we invented something called the Hula Skirt. So that these coconuts, they all wear this Hawaiian hula skirt, so that they can penetrate through a building. They can penetrate actually through the roofs in some place, but by wearing a hula skirt, they'll shed the water so the water doesn't go down inside, and will allow us to build around all of the trees instead of cutting them down.
Right. So
Pretty basic stuff.
through them.
Sorry?
So you skirted the coconut or you built around it, but you didn't touch them. You let them as they are. That's wonderful.
Exactly. And it took me, for that particular project, here's the site down here, but it took me something like 25 time going to the site and then to figure out where the buildings were. And I built every building with string and bamboo before we started with the contract, before we did anything harmful to the site. We did things with string and bamboo, and that allowed us to be able to see where the volumes of the buildings were going to go. I believe that when I'm given a beautiful site like this, that I can only make the site look worse. Mother Nature is the queen. What she gives us naturally is the best it can ever be. So what my job is, and our jobs are as architects, is about mitigating damage. No matter how big of an ego I have, I know that I can never, when I'm given a beautiful natural site, I know I can never make it as good as what it is already. So it's about mitigating damage. Does that make sense?
Right, it does. But I'm wondering whether was your budget pushed up a lot more because you had to take all these considerations?
I absolutely not. In fact, by not grading and by making smaller units, we actually saved money for the client. You know, I worked on the Oberoi in Udaipur and in Jaipur and in Agra, and we used to joke about it that we used to go to drainage meetings. This maybe sound funny, but we spent so much time trying to organize where a little bit of, it doesn't rain very much in those places, yeah? We spent so much time trying to organize where the rainwater might be picked up and then brought to a culvert and then brought to another place, and put into a tank and then put out to the sewer like it's something horrible. And what I believe now, and the way I would do it now differently, is that I would have picked up the buildings. I would let the rain fall on the site as it has fallen there for millions of years, and let it do its thing. I should make my architecture take the back step and not worry about the way it drains. Let it drain naturally. Hope that makes sense.
Wow. That sounds really a lot of, I guess, an effort to educate not only the designers who are working on this, but also the financiers and the owners and the bosses, the hotel people who have a vision of what kind of hotels they want. So how difficult or how challenging was it for you to, come up with these new ideas and convince your financiers about the new thinking of conservation, of being sustainable, etc.?
Well, how to say, what's on the screen right now is, again, it's about experiences and so forth that we offer at Chintamani Wild. But to answer your question more directly, is that by doing projects of my own, I'm setting examples of inexpensive ways to build that also respect nature, but also gain the interest of the international community and get lots of high-end people, like Ed Sheeran came here. Get lots of high-end people, Leonardo, they come here to see what we're doing. So by leading by example, I guess, is the best way to answer your question.
Right. That sounds really the right way to do it. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on.
So again, this is a slide that's all dedicated to JW Marriott in Phu Quoc, and it's we are creating a Willy Wonka experience, if you will. And we've created this fictitious a university. And these two big dogs over here, they're the mascots for, this is the entrance into the university. I created this, the Lamarck Ridgebacks, that's the name of the dogs. And you know why? Because I love dogs.
There's Sammy.
No, this is Frankie. I have 6 dogs. They're all here with me right now.
Right. So each
Yeah.
one takes a turn with you.
This one's twice.
Webinar.
Uh,
All right. So,
so this is luxury.
mhm.
That to me, that when you're in that place, you're comfortable. You can be with your girlfriend, your boyfriend, and you're in a great place. When you're by yourself, that to me is the luxury.
True.
This to me is luxury. To be able to be out, be comfortable, be able to hear the gibbon, hear the birds. That's luxury. This to me is luxury.
Right.
Arrive at my Shintamani Wild. We arrive by a 450-meter zip line. And you have to climb up a tower, 12 floors in the air, and we zip across a waterfall.
Right. Right.
And this is our trapping. This is luxury. This is a trap that goes off automatically. We saw slow loris last week, which was great.
What is the trap for?
The trap is when something goes by, it takes a picture, so we know it's in the forest.
Okay.
And then this is luxury too. This is for the last 20 years or so. I've been really involved in my hotel and called Shintamani and Siam Rip. And then these are all the people that work at our hotel school. And we have we support small schools. We've done, several thousand wells and so forth. You do a lot of this in India, better than we do. And then this right here, this is a new program that we're handing out water filters. We have a farm school. Where we're growing a lot of our own, and we also have the dentistry programs where we go with great dentists that arrive 3 times a year into the field and then give children their first dentistry ever. And small loans program. So that is success to me.
Right. May I ask you about a question on philanthropy?
Yeah.
How did you look at this aspect of diverting into a field of work which really requires a lot of your time, I guess? How do you sort of want to align with it later on, and how do you see this going forward?
How do I see what going forward?
Your philanthropy activities, and how do you align it to what's happening with you professionally? Is it different? Are they sort of 2 different worlds, or do you think do you sort of look at it as aligning it together and both of them happening with you alongside?
Well, you know what is that, as you know, I design hotels. Now in Cambodia, I own hotels, but the reason that I own hotels is because of the philanthropy, because we can do good. That's the only reason why I do it. So to answer your question, it's one and the same. It's part of my business. It's part of my joy is designing hotels, and then I think by owning hotels, it makes me a better hotel designer. But my prime objective is to help. Period.
Okay. Thank you for that. And now, I have a few things but if you can show us what all I wanted to know from you, you've been very successful, perhaps almost throughout. And after, well, in the third decade of your work, probably you have also undergone a lot of experience with not only your subject domain, but with people, with the communities around you. How would you define your success now? And what insight can we have about that?
I honestly, I think that I'm not very successful yet, and I haven't really found anything that's groundbreaking. But my goal is before I'm dead, before I'm dead, I'm going to get there somehow.
So you still have many more years to go. And that.
Yeah, we just got to keep on trying.
What advice would you have for the young millennial, about those who are on the way to develop their professional life? How do you see this field moving forward? What's going to happen post-COVID? I mean, there are many questions in our minds, in the youngsters' minds, and I'm sure there's a lot you can say about it. But do you think there really is a future ahead, and what kind could it be?
Absolutely, there's a future ahead. And I think that future is very bright, and especially in India.
Mhm.
I think that your country, more so than many countries around the world, has more potential for tourism and for exploring the idiosyncrasies of the villages of India. Everyone knows the big places, Rajasthan, da 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 da. But there's so many more layers beyond that. So my suggestion is three things for your Indian students. Is
Mhm.
that right now, don't wait for post-COVID. Get out and see India.
Okay.
And number two, leave your handphones behind. Don't, because I think that's the ruin of young people today. They spend way too much time on screen. Go out into India. Number three, go out into India with your sketchbooks and your pencils and try to understand in a deeper way the architecture, the people, your wonderful crafts that you have. Try to understand by way of drawing. And by way of drawing, that is so much more it lasts in your head so much more than taking an iPhone picture. And it lasts so much more than your IG account, et cetera, et cetera. If you can actually sit down and for 10 minutes, for 2 hours, draw something, and that will be with you for life, as opposed to taking a photograph. Whenever I go on vacation, I'm always bringing my watercolor pad, my sketch pad. I draw continuously. And by drawing, that makes you more creative. It trains your mind. When someone comes to Bensley to get a job, they try to show me their portfolio. 99% is filled with computer drawings. I went, I don't want to see that. Here's a piece of paper, here's a pencil. Go and draw that Ganesha. I want to see, and I have a Ganesha here. And I said, draw Ganesha. And I have probably 100 different drawings of the Ganesha from various people that have come in. And I will know within half an hour whether that person can design or not by the way he draws the Ganesha, he or she.
Mhm. Well, I guess the audience were made up of young people. Perhaps you may not be convinced as much by your teachers about drawing, but here's Bill telling you drawing is important, and you perhaps develop your thinking through drawing, and do you develop a style and way of seeing. So it's really going to be helpful. And so that's great, Bill. Thank you so much for saying all those things. But I have a lot of questions lined up for you. Are you ready? Do you want to have a drink of water before you start on that?
Shalom.
Okay, so questions for you. Okay, this is really business-like. How do you manage to negotiate with your clients to accept your Willy Wonka design language in the traditional contextual setup? Okay.
You know, people come to me because they want something different. So I don't have to, especially now, I don't have to do too much convincing. But we have to perform. So it's really, how to say, it's now, the efforts are more internal now than they are about working necessarily with hotel companies, or it's how do I get the best out of ourselves and about all wonderful 120 designers that I have here. That's really the key.
Right.
It's an internal.
Mm-hmm. Shall I go on to the next one? Since you have worked on certain Indian projects, how do you think Indians perceive luxury as compared to your other international clients? That's an interesting one.
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's a very, very good question. You know, when we finished the Jaipur,
Mm-hmm.
in the Oberoi, yeah, in Jaipur, there was that first 3 years, there were maybe 2% Indian clients coming to that. And then when I went back to Udaipur earlier this year, the clientele was 100% Indian. There was no foreigners there at all, except for me. So that answers your question. I mean, the learning curve of Indian travelers is going like this and up and up and up and up and up and up. So it's very gratifying to see that.
Right. Shashi, who's a huge fan of yours, has a question for you. Do you consider designers like yourself dream visualizers? Do you think hotels are slowly transforming from monolithic structures to what could be called invisible or less visible experiences?
Absolutely, yes. Perfect.
Mm-hmm. So has Shashi answered his question himself? So the other one is, of course, you have to answer this, Bill. Do you consider yourself a dream visualizer?
Oh God, yeah, I'm a dreamer. Oh yeah, in fact, my Thai name is Subin, which means the dreamer.
Well, at some point you are, and that's what Shashi. I hope you are. You are hearing what Bill is telling you. Varsha has a question. What kind of materials do you use for such innovative structures? Materials that you really like using?
The materials that I like using, 9 times out of 10, come from a 200 kilometer radius of the site. If I'm in Jaipur, I'm going to use the Jaipur stones, right? If I'm working in Vietnam, I'm going to be using materials that I know that they can make well there. They make beautiful concrete tiles. They are fantastic in cement rendering works. They are terrific in forming steel works, etc. And very good also in crafting and in carpentry. So to answer your question very simply, look locally, understand what people do locally, and work with that. That is environmentally the most sensitive and sensible thing to do.
Right, right. Shweta is a big fan of yours and thanks you for a lovely conversation. Her question is, why do you love designing hotels as much as you do?
I how to say, let me change that question a little bit. I love designing hotels as opposed to houses or as opposed to apartments, because, and especially high-end hotels. And this is very important in that, and I love that because they're maintained. A 5-star hotel is maintained beautifully, should be, especially Four Seasons and that high Capellas and Rosewood and so forth. They put a lot of money into maintaining, and in fact, I've been working on the Four Seasons in Chiang Mai every single year since they opened 25 years ago. I am their visual policeman.
Okay.
As where I worked on beautiful houses, and I worked on houses for 3 years, for example. The day that the owner moves in,
It's not a postcard with
hell. And you can't say anything because it's not your house. So that's why I like to work on hotels, because of they're maintained. It's as simple as that.
Well, those of you who are aiming to design for residences, that's a little hint from Bill. Okay. Okay. Another question is from Shreya. How do you navigate disagreements with clients over creative differences?
I'm sorry, you say once again?
Okay. How do you navigate disagreements with clients over creative differences?
I take that's a very good question. I take the idea that every design problem has hundreds of answers, and to never let design differences between you and your client move you apart. Think about all of the different options which might be good for you and good for your client. There's no black and white in design.
Right. That's some words of wisdom, and I am very sure all of us experience differences, and that's a good one to follow. So another question from Chandu. What are some sustainable materials you have used and what's your favorite? Can you name them?
I can.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite sustainable materials are materials that are pre-loved, that are reused. Anything that's reused. The chair that I'm sitting in, the table that I have my feet on, the chair that my puppy is sitting in over here, they're all, I bought them, recently, but they're all 40, 50, 60 years old. It's the Capella Ubud, the #1 hotel in the world. The interiors are primarily made from garbage.
Okay.
It sounds really funny, doesn't it? But they're primarily made from garbage. They're primarily made from things that people didn't want anymore, and I go into the junk shops and I pull things out and let's put this together with that, and maybe we can make a bed.
Right.
And yeah, it works, you know. And so the answer to the question is anything that's recycled is my favorite material.
So perhaps it's also about cultivating an eye. You
Yes.
look at an object and visualize it, and perhaps that's your own individual development. Okay.
I love them too.
Sorry.
And I love junk.
I think you can afford to say that, Bill. all of us who are struggling to do things, we have to find our own little sphere of success. Okay.
Yeah.
How do you make a room cooler naturally?
You know, naturally. There's the obvious question. The obvious answer is by shading.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things that the high rises of Delhi, of Gurgaon, don't do. And they sit, you know, blankly in the hot sun, and they overheat if you're not pumping thousands of kilowatts of air conditioning into them. It's about shading, it's about insulation, it's about cross ventilation. One of my favorite things that I use in high-end resorts, it's called a big ass fan.
Mhm.
And it's the most fan you've ever seen. It moves lots and lots and lots of air. So even in the hottest day, underneath a big ass fan, I'm happy.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, here's a tough question. 36 locations and different cultures. How did you ensure the local is authentic? How much research do you do before you start a project? So it's about your statement saying that you really always build in a little bit of the local culture into the space. So how much of research takes place, and how do you do it?
That's a really good question, and I have maybe a three-part answer.
Mhm. Okay.
One of the things I do when I go to a new place, and that is that I will go to the place of worship. And it doesn't matter whether it's a synagogue or a Hindu temple or a Balinese temple or a church in wherever. It doesn't matter. I'll go to the place of worship because that is the place that over the centuries, that's the place where people tend to put more design energy. So even if you, and that by seeing that design energy, then that gives me an innate understanding of who these people are. It's like those people are, hey, go dogs, go. It's like as I can understand from the drawing of somebody's Ganesha, I can understand that. Two, I will go to every single museum. Number two, I'll go to every single museum that I can possibly go to in that particular location to understand history, to understand art, to understand where they're coming from. And number three, I'm going to go to the bookstores that there is there and buy everything. And sometimes I come away from a new place with 40, 50 books, and I absorb them. I'm a big reader. I just finished Shantaram last night. It was great.
Whoa. So, well, young designers, we also need to read a lot. I think that is going to be a good habit, which is going to sustain us through our professional life.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good advice, Bill. Okay, another question to do with hospitality. A lot has been said about anticipatory services and hospitality, and the value of a first impression. So where do you start for the guest? So that's the impression the guest needs to have, right? Anticipatory hospitality and a service, that is, and a first impression for the guest who comes in. So in your design, how would you, do you consider this at all?
Well, remember that slide about the way that you enter my Shintamani Wild? The 400-meter zip line.
Yes.
So people are anticipating months in advance. Oh, holy shit, I have to go on the zip line in order to get into that hotel. Oh yeah, I want to do it, because the vast majority of the people that come to us have never zip lined before. And when you can put somebody out of their comfort zone, even if it's that much, people will remember it. And by telling people you have to come in by zip line, that is how to say that people will remember and anticipate, because 40% of travel is anticipation, as you know. So and that's probably the best example that I can think of. The second best example is our Four Seasons in Chiang Rai, where people were anticipating for riding an elephant for the very first time. People like that, getting pushed out of their box.
Yeah, that's going to be breathtaking, literally breath holding. I can sense that. Okay. And there's a very nice question about the hula skirt. I'm sure people had a different vision image in their mind when you said hula skirt, but that's interesting. How do you learn about these things like the hula skirt? And can you reuse this feature in a different climate?
I want everybody to use hula skirts, for sure. Now, and it's pretty darn simple to do. It's my own invention. I didn't find it anywhere else, but because I wanted to be able to take coconuts and trees through the roof without having it leak. So the key is plastic sheet, and then we do something called ijuk, or something of very dense fiber, and then on top of that is a long grass. So it's that hula skirt. Underneath the skirt, there's several layers of waterproofing, but you can do it a million different ways. But the most important thing is to respect Mother Nature and to work with the trees as they were there first before us.
Right. So does it work for other trees as well?
Of course.
Okay. Well, I'm sure this is something which you people, the designers could be making use of. There's a very important question over here. Hoteliers and designers should be more accountable for the impact their projects have on environment.
Agreed.
Yes. So how would you deal with this? I mean, what do you take care of when you are in the process of designing?
What do I take care of? What do you mean?
This is saying that, yes, these projects have an impact on the environment. So how much of it troubles you? So for example, the hotel owner will say, I want a big hotel, a good one, visible from whatever, the moon. How would you sort of want to go around doing these works?
Well, as I said a little bit earlier, is that people come to us now because they're much more than 20 years ago. They're much more aligned with good environmental practices. So I don't have to necessarily start from ground zero with every client. I think that in general, the hospitality business now is much more aligned to building in an environmentally correct way. It's becoming very clear the last 2 years especially. It's becoming much clearer that guests are choosing hotels which are more environmentally and socially correct than they were in the past. So we're making that gradual transition, whether we like it or not.
Right. Well, I know you've repeated this so many times, but really, we can sense your essence of work. now here's a little personal question, but I know that if people are eager to know you better, Bill, how did a boy from California become the king of luxury exotic travel? Tell us more about your journey.
Um, I how to say, I grew up on a farm in California, where I grew my own vegetables. We had bees, we had chickens, quail, ducks, rabbits, compost heap. We had a closed system at home, and where we were pretty much self-reliant on everything except for beef. Uh, we had orange trees, we had fruit trees, etc. So the idea of sustainability and organic gardening and so forth, I grew up with that from a very early stage. Then I went to school to learn landscape architecture, which also taught me first and foremost how to be a good patron of the earth. Then secondly, I went to school at Harvard where I learned architecture. But it's really my training as being a farmer and a gardener and a landscape architect that is most important in my work today.
Okay, so Bill, there are many, many more questions, but can I just ask you one last one, because this is really somebody who has she's in dilemma about being a budding artist. So Shreya says that I have often conflicts and dilemma about whether appropriating art to learn is somehow wrong. And how do you cruise between creating original work and perhaps taking inspiration from other artists in your work?
I began painting 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot stop painting now. And my favorite thing to do is to take inspiration from other artists. And I boil it here and it comes out in oil and in acrylic, etc. But I love painting, and I think that artistic expression helps me so much as an architect, as an interior designer, as a landscape architect. It makes me much freer. So don't be in a dilemma. Mm-hmm. Love that idea that you love artists, you love taking ideas from other artists. That's great. Do it.
Great. So Shreya, I hope you are going to leave aside all your worries and dilemmas and go ahead. At least as you move, as you evolve, I'm sure you'll find your path. But Bill, I must say that the way I have heard you today, you're just, you're steaming along. And well, if it's art 3 years ago, I'm sure in another few years, you're going to discover many more things you'd love to do. And we are really looking forward to seeing a lot of your work. I mean, it's really exciting. I see a lot of your fans coming up with these questions. There are many more questions, and I was requesting Mink from your office to help us answer these questions later so that we can forward it to the people who have asked all these questions. I want to thank you a lot. Thank you for opening up, sharing with us your life, your journey, your vision, your thoughts, and we hope we will be able to keep in touch. There are many of them who are asking about interning with you. So I'm sure they can write to your office, and perhaps you have a particular process to follow. So I would advise students to do that.
Right. You're drawn to Indonesia.
Yes. Okay. But before we move on, I'd like to invite the participants who are here today to do check up on our courses, on what we are offering. We do want to, as we have mentioned, we have just recently started with our third term, and we would be looking at introducing the fourth term in December. If you have any questions, come and look up our short-term programs being introduced in October. And of course, any more questions on Bill, I'd love to get your questions so that I can be in touch with him to ask you about those questions, Bill. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. And thank you to the JSID team and Mink and Bensley Studio, members of Bensley Studio.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.